Good afternoon, and welcome to our second program of the season, an update on the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, MWPA. This is the Marin Coalition. I am Scott Pinsky, Chair, and we are pleased to have you join us. For those of you who are not familiar with the Marin Coalition or have not been to our programs before, the Marin Coalition is an all-volunteer, nonprofit public affairs forum here in Marin County. We strive to present speakers from varied perspectives and sectors of our community to create conversations that truly matter. We welcome all viewers and are continuing to present all of our programs online to the public at no cost. At the same time, we do have certain operating costs for the organization, and we rely on our members and donors to help make these programs possible. And therefore, we invite you to make a tax-deductible donation or become a member by visiting our website, marincoalition.org. Before we begin, I'd like to tell you about next month's event. We're very excited about this one as well. On November 3rd, Wednesday at noon, we will be presenting a program entitled News and Print Media, What Does the Future Hold? Our guests, San Francisco Chronicle publisher Bill Nagel and Marin IJ publisher Rob DiVincenzi. Both will join us to provide their takes on where print news media are today and where they may be going. So for all of you newspaper readers and media hounds, you'll want to tune in and find out their views on what's happening in the world of real media, as opposed to fake news, I suppose. A couple housekeeping items. We are recording this event, and it will be available to share for yourself or anyone else who would like to watch this at a later time by going to our website, marincoalition.org, and going to the program archives page. Also, closed captioning is available if you click on the live transcript link at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Also, for questions and answers, as usual, we will be inviting your questions at the end of the formal presentation. Please type them in to the Q&A box, and we'll read in as many as possible. And you'll also see there in the housekeeping links for our website. Okay, without further ado, let's get going. Today's program is entitled Marin's New Wildfire Preparedness Agency, Launched and Moving Forward. We have two guests, Bruce Goines, President of the Board, Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, and Mark Brown, the MWPA Executive Officer. Welcome to them both. The reference launched in the title of the program underlines the fact that today's guests have been present at the creation of a completely new governmental entity here in the county, a joint powers authority that was created in March of 2020 through a successful voter initiative that actually received over 70% of Marin voters. MWPA is tasked with coordinating a comprehensive wildfire prevention and emergency preparedness plan for 17 local municipal governments, fire districts, and utility districts. And today we'll be privileged to hear from the two top leaders of this new JPA and learn how the initial year and a half have gone and what they're hoping to achieve going forward. And as a Fire Safe Marin Committee leader myself, I'm very interested in hearing this program. Let me tell you a little bit about our guests, and then I'll get off the screen. Bruce Goines is president of the board of the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. He's now serving his second year as president. In 2014, Bruce retired from the U.S. Forest Service after serving 40 years as a wildland firefighter and professional forester. His work included on-the-ground forest management and wildland firefighting, and in his last 20 years, he managed statewide programs supporting preparation and implementation of community wildfire prevention plans. Bruce graduated from UC Berkeley with a Bachelor of Science in Forest Resource Management, and he remains a California registered professional forester. Mark Brown is the executive director of MWPA. He was hired by the county fire department as a firefighter/paramedic in 1991. And with the MCFD, Mark served on a CAL FIRE incident management team and was a founding member of the North Bay team. His deployments included floods, earthquakes, mudslides, civil unrest, and wildland fires. After serving nearly 30 years with MCFD, Including as Deputy Fire Chief, Mark became the Executive Director of the MWPA in October last year. Mark has a Bachelor of Arts in Applied Science, Applied Studies, Organizational Leadership. And with that, let me present our first presenter, Bruce Goines. Thank you, Bruce.
Hi, thanks very much, Scott. Let me get full screen here. So thank you very much for the opportunity for us to give us the opportunity to talk about the critical wildfire prevention work that's being done here in Marin County. The theme of our talk today is that with your support, and Scott introduced that the taxpayers supported this initiative, here in Marin, we're working to accelerate and to change how we approach wildfire prevention. The theme of this is, the theme is changing wildfire prevention program, and up in the upper right, investing in a fire adapted Marin County. This is our goal. So slide mark, please. We've been introduced. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, we're going to split this presentation up. I'm going to cover the first part. I'm going to provide some background and history on the events that brought us to where we are today, and briefly describe some of the critical events and ecological conditions that have led to the formation of MWPA. So I'll be covering these first two. And then Mark, as our executive officer, is going to be covering what we're doing and where we're headed. So next slide, please. Okay, let's dig right in. This is our first choice of slide. As Scott said, I fought wildfires with the United States Forest Service for about 20 years, from the mid 1970s until the late 90s. And my experience, and I think Mark's too in his early career, is it was exceedingly rare to lose a home or a life in a wildfire. And I think that it's become clear, particularly this last decade, that these conditions have changed. Our forests are more dense. We're experiencing more erratic weather. We're experiencing stronger wind events. We're experiencing warmer and drier climates. And of course, the product then is much larger and more severe fires. And to compound this here is that we now have more homes and lives to defend within the forest, within the wildland-urban interface area. So we chose this terrifying image. This is from the Rocky Fire, which occurred in Lower Lake, California in 2015. And let's please take a moment to look at this image. Take a look at this image. What's wrong with this picture? The first thing I notice is that we have a log home, as you can tell by the corners here, wooden home, right in the middle of a dense and decadent forest area. So in the event of an ignition, what could go wrong? And I don't know the outcome of this, but I can tell you likely what occurred. So some of the key question for us in this changing paradigm and changing environment is what can we as individuals, and you as individuals, and what can public agencies do to change the outcome of the inevitable fire? It's not if, but when, and then, but how. So you, the Marin County voters, you've tasked the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, Joint Powers Authority, to take this challenging task on. And to work to make a difference. And we're here to let you know that there's much in the works and much to do. So before we move on to what we're currently doing, let's go back to how we got to the current situation. Mark, can you next slide, please? As a forester, U.S. Forest Service, I was a part of this. We were engaged in what was called a war on fire. Our rule, the Forest Service 10 a.m. rule, was established in the 1990s after some wildfires in Montana. They burned a little over 1 million acres and destroyed homes and communities and resulted in substantial loss of human life. And this 10 a.m. rule said all wildfires will be completely out by 10 o'clock the next morning. And it's not actually true, because we were successful in about 96 or 97% of the ignitions. Those other 3 to 4% went on for days and weeks and months sometime. But the 10 a.m. rule, this is well intended. It was designed to protect the forests and protect our communities and protect the natural resources within these forests, the timber, the wildlife, the water, the recreational sites, you name it, to protect those resources from potentially devastating effects of fire. So the Forest Service and our state and private partners, also state foresters, private timber agencies, and communities, we did such a great job that we succeeded. And we succeeded in nearly eliminating one of the natural elements that help maintain forests in a healthy and fire resilient condition, and kept them as a fire adapted state. We eliminated. We now know, we've come to know here this last few decades and better understand that fire is a critical and natural element of the forest landscape. So Mark, moving on to the next slide, please. This is an image that compares a landscape about 90 years ago. And this is common. This could be Marin County. This could be San Mateo County. This could be Santa Clara County. In essence, fires and disturbances, fires and grazing were strong factors that may help to maintain a relatively open landscape. And our forests today look more like this. They're more dense, more continuous forest canopies, and these forests burn more intensively, and they're more resistant to control. So when we get a fire here, a little bit easier to suppress as opposed to one here. And I just want to say that fire is a natural process that shaped the structure and the composition of our historic forests. And many of you know this, I'm sure, but I'm just going to make a brief statement that Native American fires, Native American burning, lightning strikes, rock falls, rock downfalls that created sparks. There were multiple sources of ignition that shaped that caused fires and shaped the composition of our forests. And we've excluded it from our landscape. And now we're living with the consequences. So we have an incredible task to go back on actually 140 years of deferred maintenance. Mark, next one, please. So this image is something that you have not seen. Some of you may have, but this is a satellite image of California's forests. And the title is, They Become Increasingly Unhealthy. This image compares the greenness, how green our forests are now from 2018, the difference between 2018 and now. This technology, which measures the greenness of a vegetative landscape, this is the technology that farmers use with drones to track the health and the vigor of their crops. And this is what they use to determine when and where to water, when they need water. What this image, here we are in Marin County, if you can see my cursor. We are surrounded by unhealthy forests. Thank you, Mark. So our forests are stressed. And if those of you that get out and look at the landscape, if you see what's happening, our forests this year are severely leaf loss, and they're changing from green to yellow and brown. These yellow and brown leaves these aren't deciduous trees. These should be green. So we're severely drought stressed. Mark, next image. Let's bring this to Marin County. This is the same imagery for Marin County. I live here. This is Black Point down here in San Rafael. But as you can see, the landscape is covered with areas that are severely drought stressed. And when ignited, it's a completely different, a difficult situation. Mark, next one, please. I'd like to take a moment to toggle between the previous slide and this one. This slide shows land ownership in Marin County. The yellow is what we now characterize as the wildland urban interface. This is where we've moved into our beautiful forest to enjoy, the peace and ambiance of living there. If you'll just scroll back, just pick an area. Let's pick Novato here, and scroll back to the previous slide, please. Wui. What's the condition of the forest around the Wui? This and back, Mark, if you go to the next one. Similarly, you can pick anywhere in this county, Point Reyes area, anyway, forest knolls. Our forests are under severe stress, and this causes problems. Mark, Please, next slide. So I can't go through any discussion about fire and fire intensity without talking about climate change. Yeah, it's well understood that mostly understood that climate change is changing here, and our conditions are hotter. This is 1950. This is the mean temperature. This is 2020. This is, we're up, right up in the upper end here. Graph shows California's average annual temperature since 1950. And the plot on the right shows precipitation versus temperature, and not to make your eyes go bad on you, but what this shows is that the hottest and the driest summers have all occurred in the last 20 years. The bottom line is that the Western United States has gotten hotter and drier, and fire season has gotten much longer. And we are experiencing, if you've probably heard it, our fire seasons are extended by 2 to 3 months of what they were when I was a firefighter. Mark, next one, please. So, what's the effect? And if you haven't seen this is worth really drinking this in. So we talked about that we've excluded fire. We're experiencing drought. We have insects and disease. We have changing climate. We've moved into the WUI. This is an image that shows what the consequences of all those changes are. The red outline, this is the city of Santa Rosa. The red outline is a fire that occurred in 1964. It's called the Hanley Fire. It ignited in around Calistoga, and it burned all the way down to Santa Rosa in about 3 days. I've heard 3 and 3.5 days. The black image outline, northeastern corner, this black outline is the Tubbs Fire, which occurred in 2017. The Tubbs Fire occurred in ignition in Tubbs Lane. This fire, nearly the same perimeter, burned from Calistoga to Coffey Park in 7 hours. This is, and the fact is, this is representative. The fact is that fires repeat themselves and fire footprints repeat themselves. And with higher rates of spread, much higher density, much more resistant control, we really have need to be fearful and figure out what action we need to take. Mark, next slide, please. For those of you who haven't seen this is a map of the fire history in Marin County. These are headlines: 2019, 23, 1929, 1945, 1995. The point is we have a significant history of wildfire, and we have seen a lot of damage, and that any of our communities could be next. But I'd like to draw your eyes to the center image, this map, and the image there where the cursor is currently. If you'll outline that, this is a fire that started in my hometown, right next to Highway 101. It started in 1929 by a farmer tilling, who knows what, digging for fence posts, hit a rock, who knows. But this fire started in Novato, and it burned and this image is not actually accurate. It burned 2 Stinson Beach. This fire, this fire today, if you think look at the Hanley Fire and the Tubbs Fire, a fire like that today in Novato would have devastating consequences, starting in Ignacio Valley, into southwestern Novato, Marinwood, bordering communities. I toured this landscape with my fire chief a couple of months ago. We opened up some gates and drove through the wildland area, and I can tell you that this is a uniform, dense, decadent stand that goes for tens of miles. And it's ripe for another run, given the right conditions. Not trying to scare you, but this is reality. The right side map, this is what, in 2020, I think you all remember that we had a lightning storm and fires all around us. This is what the landscape looked around. We're in Marin County. This is what the landscape looked like. We were surrounded by fire, Woodward Fire, fires north and east. I talked with my chief, and he told me that the incident command teams were actually looking at contingency planning. They actually discussed the possibility of evacuating all of the communities west of these fires all the way out to the Pacific Ocean if the northeastern winds had continued. So anyway, the point is that we're here and now, and you know, it's time to be aggressive. So Mark, next slide, please. Okay, why change the paradigm? I hate this image, but I think that this is what we have to think about. You know, so I've talked about fire exclusion, building homes and communities in the wildland, years of drought, increasing wind events, warming and drying climates all come, and they have implications for us living in around forests. And this is what we want to prevent. And this indeed is that tub fire that burned in 7 hours from Calistoga to Coffee Park. Mark, let's go to the next slide, please. Here's what we have going. I'm going to just start to be a little bit more positive. The good news is that we have 19 incredible fire agencies here in Marin, and they're responsible and knowledgeable, and they work well together. This is an asset. We're blessed to have these fire agencies. Mark, next. We're also blessed that our county board of supervisors, in looking at what's going on historically, in 2017, after those fires, they commissioned a team to come together, fire staff, law enforcement, Office of Emergency Services, land management agencies. They commissioned a team to go on a tour and talk with partner agencies up north to find out what could we learn from the fire siege in 2017. They came back with one statement in this report. When fire started, the only thing separating Marin from their neighbors was simply an ignition source. This image, the top lessons learned, is Coffee Park, but the Board of Supervisors commissioned the report, and basically they started the ball rolling as far as what lessons could we learn, what could we do. Secondly, the lower image, lower left, this 2019, again, the Marin Civil Grand Jury, and this wasn't the first time. They've done jury after jury after jury, but they dove in on this problem, and they prepared a report which concluded that the creation of a joint powers authority was needed to coordinate a comprehensive and consistent approach towards pre-ignition planning. So the recommendations were form a joint powers authority, integrate prevention and risk reduction work, and create an ongoing source of funding. This is where we are. Mark, next, please. I want to just take a moment having been with the Forest Service for 40 years, there's a new concept that fire agencies and community leaders are talking about. What used to be war on fire and fire control wildfire and prevent and suppress wildfire, and apply technologies to strongly bring fires under control, has come to, there is this new concept. The new paradigm that we're talking about is to work to create fire resilient human and natural communities. That's the fourth bullet on the right. And the bottom line is the bottom right corner, the solution to help a more holistic approach to fire management, where local communities, adjacent property owners, and governments work together to co-manage fire risk. And so, if you will, bear with me. Let's actually take a moment to read this. A fire adapted community is a knowledgeable and engaged community in which awareness and actions of the residents regarding the infrastructure, buildings, and the landscaping and the surrounding ecosystem lessens the need for extensive protective actions and enables a community to safely accept fire as a part of the landscape. Okay, it's taken us 140 years to get here. Here we are, new paradigm, MWPA. We got a lot of work to do, but I can tell you philosophically, we're looking to become fire adapted, to be aware, to take action, and to be able to withstand, accept the fire, rather than being terrified and running from it. Next slide, Mark, please. And I'm coming to the end of my thing here. We're also lucky. This is the 2016 Community Wildfire Protection Plan. We actually have a new Community Wildfire Protection Plan, which Mark will adopt it. We have an amazing fire community here that put together this CWPP. And this is the stuff that I oversaw statewide for some years. Anyway, the focus of this, was coded options and having current wildfire hazard severity maps and understanding where the WUI was and helping to put in place ordinance regarding construction and maintenance in communities and to focus on evacuation plans. Mark, next one. An asset that we have unprecedented is that after the Oakland Hills fires, Marin County adopted one of the nation's first fire safe councils. And this is Jason Weber here, by the way, for those that you don't know him, an amazing, astounding individual, county fire chief. But we have the resources. We have Fire Safe Marin. They do outreach and education. They're trusted, and we're working. MWP is working directly with Fire Safe Marin to begin to achieve this new paradigm. So, Mark, please. Next one. So, I just want to say thank you for giving me time to speak and give you this background. In 2020, Measure C passed with 70.8% of Marin County voters support. And Mark's going to address the work that we've done this last year and how setting up MWPA and the work that we're doing. So thank you for your for listening. And Mark, go get them.
Thanks, Bruce. And some of the stuff that Bruce was talking about made me think about a presentation that some of us gave at the League of California Cities. And Bill Tyler was speaking, and Bill Tyler is a phenomenal fire chief for Nevada Fire. He came up through the fire prevention ranks and had a strong focus in fire prevention. And at the League of California Cities, he mentioned that I'm surrounded by operations type guys who are putting fires out who have finally seen the light. And they're coming over to the prevention side. And I'm like, going, wow, Bill, you're talking about me. I've seen the futility of putting my efforts towards fighting the fires. And I want to start putting so much more effort into pre-fire. Let's put our work in place before the fires ever ignite, because we just can't catch up if we wait to do it after the fires ignite. This is a community down in Southern California, Rancho Santa Fe. And they had the advantage of being able to design this community to withstand fire. And you can see that it worked well during the witch fire in 2007. We don't have that luxury in Marin. We already have our pretty much built environment. So we're going to have to adapt the environment that we're in to become fire adapted. And that's what the work the MWPA is doing. And part of it is our new 2020 Community Wildfire Protection Plan. And a great way to describe this is that this is creating an inventory of risk of our communities. We used updated LiDAR data. Marin County Fire was successful in getting a grant to update the data. So we have very current data, although unfortunately, 2-year-old data is almost out of date now. But we were able to use that data along with historical fire patterns, historical weather patterns, our demographics of our communities, the terrain, the fuel that was in there, and created a parcel level risk assessment. And if you look at this map, the darker the color, the greater the risk. And this map is really designed for the risk towards structures rather than the risk of overall wildfire. And where there's structures, there's lives. And so this is helping to map our inventory of mitigations for our inventory of risks. And we're using the CWPP to guide where we need to be strategic, where we need to strategically apply our mitigations. And then building the MWPA has been a very rewarding experience for the last year of my life and a year and a half of the existence of the MWPA. One of the first things that we worked on was to develop our mission statement. And that is the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority leads to development of fire adapted communities using sound scientific, financial, programmatic, ecological practices, vegetation management, community education, evacuation, and warning systems with the support of its member and its partner agencies. And I want to emphasize that last piece, member and partner agencies. Right now, the strength of the MWPA is the strength of the member agencies and the expertise that we have within each of our member agencies, but just as importantly, all of our partner agencies. One of the lead partner agencies or the group is our land managers. We have so much open space. We're blessed with the amount of open space that we have in Marin, but we need to work with our land managers to help make it more healthy, because a healthy forest is good wildfire prevention. So we're working consistently with them. Our residents need to understand that they have to be a significant component of this. It's not just going to be the government agencies that work our way through this. We need all of our residents to take on their responsibility. And that's why our approach right now is what we're calling the house out approach. If you look at every urban conflagration that we've seen, it turns into mostly house to house spread, where one house is igniting, creating embers and igniting multiple houses downwind. So if we can keep those first houses from igniting and we can keep the downwind houses from being able to be ignited, then we can start decreasing the number of urban conflagrations we see, decreasing the level of damage, decreasing the number of deaths. So we need our residents to work with us to harden their homes, provide defensible space around their homes with fire smart landscaping. And we're not asking for people to clear cut their yards and make it barren. No, we're just asking to rearrange the way they have the vegetation in their yards and focus on their homes and make their homes less ignitable. And we have our civic leaders, whether it is elected officials or people of influence within our communities, so we can develop momentum to get our residents to jump on board and help us out. And then our elected officials by adopting fire smart codes and regulations and make them consistent as much as we can across the county. Working with our first responders, because all of our fire agencies have excellent fire prevention staff. And those are the people that we're leveraging to do the work pre-fire. But we're also making it easier for the fire response. We're making it so the firefighters can get into the fire to have a place that they can successfully fight the fire from. And then we need our business owners and businesses to work with us all along the way. And here's our vision statement. The Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority communities are informed, prepared, fire adapted, resilient, and capable of withstanding a major fire limited loss and major property damage while protecting our rich environmental diversity. And I think one of the things that's important here is we know that we're going to have fires. And we know that even with all the work that we want to do, that we will likely have devastating fires. However, we want to limit the damage. We want to limit the loss of life. We cannot bring us down to a zero risk environment. We just want to limit that. And we also have a tremendous environmental diversity, rich environmental diversity that we want to protect. So we've created 5 goals: reduce wildfire fuels, improve our evacuation systems, reduce risk to homes, educate the public, and that's been a very big one that we've been working on, and then provide grants to our residents, the grants for those who are not financially in a position to do the work themselves, and also to incentivize the work. And here's where I think we really succeeded with the MWPA, and that's the governance structure. And what I really like about this governance structure, it really operates from the ground up. So I'm going to start at the bottom of this organizational chart with the Operations Committee and Advisory Technical Committee. The Operations Committee is staffed by 1 member from each of our 17 member agencies. It's either a city manager or a fire chief. And so we get the subject matter expertise to the fire chiefs, coupled with the excellent government management financial skills of our city managers. Operations Committee makes our overall strategy of how we're going to attack our work plan for that year. And they're the ones that created the house out approach that we're following. So then we take it from the Operations Committee creating that strategy, and we pass it off to the Advisory Technical Committee. Again, this is populated by 1 member from each of our member agencies. These are our subject matter experts. These are the people closest to the problem. They're creating the solutions to the wildfire mitigation problems that we have. They receive their strategy from the Operations Committee. They work with the entire committee and also within our 5 geographical areas, which we'll describe here in a little bit, to create the work plan that the Operations Committee will bundle up as one plan that meets their strategy. They do a little bit of refining with the operations committee, and then they make a recommendation to the board of directors to accept that plan. That's when myself and our staff kick in and start getting the work done in partnership, very much in partnership with all of our member agencies. And then we have a citizens oversight committee that is looking at everything that we're doing, proactively working with us, making sure that we are using the taxpayers' monies appropriately. And here's how we've helped create the synergy and how we can get our member agencies to be pulling the rope together instead of 19 member agencies or 17 member agencies working on their own. We've divided the county up into 5 geographical areas. And these geographical areas really, they're good subsets of the fuel types, the vegetation types, the housing density, and the type of terrain. So solutions that work in Novato may not be the best solutions in Southern Marin because of the different terrain and how the houses are aligned. So we can create solutions that are tailored for the Novato area, create solutions for each of our 5 geographical areas, and we can balance out the work very well that way. And if you look at our budget, 60% of it is for what we call our core projects, so wildfire detection and evacuation programs and improvements. That goes along with emergency notification improvements, vegetation management, fire hazard fuel reduction, grant management, and public education. And we'll focus on public education here a little bit. One place I want to focus is our home evaluation program. I really think that this is turning into the cornerstone of our program. We have 54 people out there that are performing evaluations at every resident within the MWPA jurisdiction. Our goal is that each residence will receive an evaluation or inspection once every 2 to 3 years, and we are on course to meet that goal. And this is one of the key ways that we're educating the public. Our evaluators standing side by side with the homeowner or the resident and go and discussing how that home can be made to be safer. And I think when we look back at the end of our first 10 years, that we're really going to hang our hat on these home evaluations. And then when we look at the community, our last budget item, it's local wildfire mitigation projects that goes straight back to our member agencies. And the reason why we have this is that our fire departments are the subject matter experts, and they are the people that are closest to their communities, and they know what's best for their communities. And so they have this funding to enhance what they've already been doing and improve upon what they've already been doing, and just use this money for projects specific to wildfire mitigation tailored for their communities. Environmental compliance, our environmental stakeholders have been side by side with us through this entire process, and we've created the Ecologically Sound Practices Group that's helping inform us in the best way possible to do our work without causing increased damage to the environment. And then we're also working hard with not only providing grants for our residents, but also creating an opportunity to bring grant revenue into the county. We're increasing the bandwidth within the MWPA so we can become more efficient and effective with spending our money. Our goal is that for every dollar a taxpayer puts out, that we're going to get another dollar in grant money. And in our stakeholder outreach, which I already discussed a little bit, our land managers, homeowners, our citizens that are concerned about the work that we're doing, our transparency, and then we already mentioned our strong relationship with the ecologically sound practices. Now our 2021-2022 work plan and the things that we've been doing both last year and going into this year. I discussed our house out approach. This is where we are really working hard with our home owners to harden their homes so that, you've probably all heard now, it's not a big wall of fire that goes marching into these communities. It's these embers that are landing, that are igniting vegetation on and around the homes, embers blowing up against the house and then forced into the eaves and into their attics. And so we're really working with informing our residents so that they can understand that concept and make it so that when an ember lands on the ground, it either self-extinguishes, or if it does catch something on fire, it stays within that one little plant and it doesn't spread further and further. Public education and Fire Safe Marin has been amazing with this. Much of our a little over $500,000 a year has been going towards our public education program managed through Fire Safe Marin, and it's been phenomenal. And I can they've been putting on either weekly or monthly webinars, or the new strategy is what we're calling Wildfire Watches, which is kind of like a news program that people can watch anytime, but it's once a month that we're issuing those. And we're getting up well over 1,000 people watching each and one of these webinars or broadcasts. We're also having people from outside of Marin County look at what we're doing and go, wow, this is pretty special. And then this bottom left corner though, there's my favorite form of public education. And that is our inspectors with the property owner face to face and going through a home evaluation and informing our public. And it works so much better if we can inform our public, let them come to their own conclusion of what they should do, rather than us telling them what they should do. And then here's an example of an evacuation route clearing. This is the same road, I promise you. And I just want to, we have to look at this picture on the right so you can understand. But that whenever you see a turn like that, that's a firefighter's shout out situation. We do not like being in those types of spots in the land. And that's where the fire is going to be most intense. So now take it over to this picture on the left. Imagine if there was a fire to the right of engine 17. What do you think the survivability is for that engine company, let alone any cars that are trying to come down that road in the before versus the after? And that's part of our house out approach. We're having the residents focus on their homes. And then we are focusing on our evacuation routes. And our goal is that for any vehicle that may be stuck in traffic on an evacuation route, they will be safe inside their car, even under fire conditions, because none of our communities are designed to effectively get people out of them quickly. So we have to be able to understand that there will be traffic jams. And so we want our residents to be safe when they're on an evacuation route, even if they aren't moving. Zonehaven is part of our goal to increase the notification and of our residents during an emergency and during an evacuation scenario. It's helping with our law enforcement and fire agencies to pre-plan and coordinate with each other. It also gives live-time traffic information, and it gives a graphical representation to our public of what zones have been evacuated, what zones are under an evacuation warning, and are these warnings and evacuation orders getting closer and closer to themselves, and they can start preparing to evacuate. If you haven't already done so, please sign up for alertmarin.org. And you also go to emergency.marincounty.org, and you can find out what evacuation zone you were in. And here's a first of its kind risk assessment that we're conducting in Marin. We have about 2 weeks until we will be receiving the proposals, and that is to study our ingress and egress routes all through Marin and to evaluate their risk, not just for fire, but also looking at the roadway conditions, the traffic patterns. What's the population for that community? So how many cars can we expect to come through there? What are going to be the pinch points? What type of traffic systems do we have in there? And this risk assessment will give us an inventory of our most dangerous roads to our safest roads. And not only that they're dangerous, but why they're dangerous. And so the MWPA can work on improving the fire safety of it. And then we can work with our partner agencies and our public works agencies to improve the roadways. San Rafael is a perfect example. They've recently installed traffic parking boxes so that people can know where to park so that we can keep that roadway open. Something that Mill Valley's been ahead of the rest of us. They've had the traffic boxes for many years, and we're starting to roll that out throughout the rest of the county. And then our local wildfire mitigation projects, whether it's controlled burns or physically removing some of the fuels. And then we have our chipper days, where every resident within the MWPA jurisdiction can sign up for a chipper day, where they just pile the material in front of the street. The chippers will come and chip it and haul it away. And this also is helping to decrease our greenhouse gas footprint. And that is, for every home that would do this on their own, they would be loading it into their vehicle and making an individual trip to haul the green waste away, whereas we're doing it with one vehicle. And we're also working on ways that we can turn this into renewable energy or have better ways of sequestering the carbon from that material. Goat grazing, and it's not just goat grazing, it's goat grazing, sheep grazing, cattle grazing. We've had a couple recent fires that have hit grazing projects and have been, it's been successful. The fire that we had on Loma Alta near the 680 trail the other day, red flag conditions, mid-slope fire road, and the fire did not go over that mid-slope fire road. That is virtually unheard of. And that's because the property owner there has done a great job of combining goat grazing with cattle grazing in that area. And it provided an effective fuel break that kept the fire from getting in from the Lucas Valley area into the Ross Valley Sleepy Hollow area. Shaded fuel breaks. There's a lot of misunderstandings about fuel breaks. A lot of people think that that they're there to stop the fire. Well, it's not necessarily that they're there to stop the fire. They're there to change the fire behavior so that firefighters have a chance to suppress the fire in that area, and also to make it so that our residents can evacuate safely under fire conditions. So if you look at the fuel conditions on the left versus on the right, you can see how ember that lands on the ground here on the right isn't going to necessarily get its way up into the trees. Whereas on the left, an ember lands here, gets these bushes burning, and then it gets up into these trees and creates an intense fire environment. And this is where we are trying to combine our local funds with our regional grant opportunities. The type of organization that we are really makes us primed for receipt of grants. And again, we want to create a return on investment for our residents. And with that, I invite Bruce to come back on, and Scott can lead us with our Q&A.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Bruce. A lot of information there, and we have some questions to follow up with now. So let me jump right into that. We have one of our attendees who asks, can the MWPA help subsidize fire management costs for homeowners on fixed income, specifically with respect to tree removal?
I could take that one. So we are developing our grant program right now, and we are looking to launch it in November. And we're trying to make it as simple as possible and intuitive as possible for all of our residents. And they'll be able to go onto our website, fill out the application, and if they've received an evaluation from one of our inspectors, then that'll make the grant process that much easier.
If I just may add that some of the member agencies have decided to invest some of the local funds in grants for home hardening and for vegetation management. Novato is an example of that. Substantial fund, up to $5,000 matching grant for home hardening, up to $1,000 matching grant for vegetation management. If you're interested and like to get that work done, contact your fire chief and ask them what the availability is. So the answer is yes, as Mark said, in the works programmatically. Some of the member agencies have already implemented a program. Money is currently available.
Okay, and that was going to be my next question, is where do they turn to? And the answer is your local fire authorities.
As well as the MWPA website is another resource for them. We are connecting the local grants with the MWPA managed grants as well.
Great. Benita Marmer asks, will attendees be provided with a link to download the Zonehaven map app?
The Zonehaven has purposely not gone to an app at this time. And that is because they don't want people to have to already have the app loaded in their phone in order to be able to use it. So it is strictly web-based at this time. And emergency.marincounty.org is the link. Click on the evaluation tab and you'll be able to see the entire map.
Okay, and that's I've been on it, but I can't remember the web address. Zonehaven.org or something like that, or.
So I'm typing right now onto the Q&A, so I'll put both links that are in there.
Okay, great, thank you. So go into the Q&A tab, everyone, and you'll see Mark is giving us a link to that Zonehaven program website. Stephen Keys asks, what are the possibilities for controlled burns to effectively reduce fuel?
That's an awesome question, Stephen. And one that we are working hard to help provide increased education on this. We do have a panel, discussion panel on November 16th between 2 and 4 that our partners at the Ecologically Sound Practices will be hosting. We've assembled a very diverse and very informed panel. I'm really looking forward to it. And we wish it was as simple as just starting prescribed fire immediately. In our grass and brush areas, we can get a good start on prescribed fire pretty easily, pretty soon. It's when we start getting into our forests, our trees and our heavier fuels. If we started just putting fire on the ground now and doing prescribed fire in the conditions that we have now, we would not be able to control it effectively. Right. So we are going to have to do some mechanical thinning in those areas before we can ever start using fire. But it's a long-term plan that we have in place, and we're going to do it in a way that's well-informed, safe, but effective. And I think one of the key things that we really need to do is help increase that awareness and knowledge surrounding prescribed fire. And so I'm really looking forward to the panel discussion. It includes current practitioners of prescribed fire. It includes some of our public safety personnel from here in Marin, including Chief Weber from Marin County Fire. It also includes a member of the Coast Miwok to discuss the tribal practices that were much more effective than what we've ever done.
By the way, just to clarify, if you're looking for that Zonehaven website address, if you go to the Q&A tab, there are 3 options there. There's open questions, answered questions, and dismissed questions. And the website Mark has put into the answered questions tab, so you'll find it right in there. Let me go back also to the last topic about subsidy and grants and so forth. Our webmaster and fellow board member, Alan Shavitz, has sent me a note saying that his subdivision, Bayside Acres, has already had 4 large eucalyptus trees that were removed pursuant to a grant that was through Fire Safe Marin and funded by MWPA. So there's a real world illustration of success getting the work actually done and paid for. Let me move on to another question here. This is also from Stephen Keys. What percentage of adults are signed up for Alert Marin and how many live in a Firewise community? I think that's what he's trying to say. Yeah, so what's the coverage of the Firewise community in Marin, which is the largest in the country still, as I understand it, but go ahead.
You're right, it is. Something really to be proud of, and it speaks to the residents that we have here in Marin. The data behind signups for Alert Marin is difficult because of privacy issues, and in the way that subscriptions are set up. One resident may have 5 signups, and we don't necessarily know which is it assigned to the adults, is it assigned to any minors within that resident, and the best estimate that we have, and it's a pretty broad range, is that 60 to 80% of our residences are signed up for Alert Marin. The demographics and where they are focused in alignment with Firewise communities is a really difficult data point for us to get. But I'll go out on a limb on this one and say that our Firewise communities are probably the leading communities in getting that message out. In fact, I leaned on Fire Safe Marin really hard because they have the great connection with our Firewise communities. And when we rolled out Zonehaven, I asked them to share with each one of our Firewise communities so that they can share within their network. And we saw great success with that.
And by the way, I'll just chime in that if you don't know if you are in a Firewise community or site, go to the Firewise website and you should be able to find information that indicates whether or not you live within such an area. And I would go further and say, if you don't, form your own Firewise site. That's what I did. We didn't have a site and we put one together, and now we have a very active site. So
Scott, can I continue on that
sure.
thread real quick, please? the best way to, if you aren't part of a Firewise community, is do exactly what Scott said. Reach out to Fire Safe Marin and reach out with your local fire department. And between the two, they will walk you through the process to become a Firewise community. Obviously, they've gotten really good at it.
Right. And if anyone has a question about it and you can't get a quick response elsewhere, write to me and I'll be happy to let you know what I know. We have a question from Benita Marmer again. When prescribed fires are being considered, how are the health effects from particulates from the fires factored into the equation?
Another really good question. And the biggest part of it is, well, first of all, understanding that when it comes to wildfire smoke, it's a pay me now or pay me later proposition. And if we do prescribe fire, we could do it under the conditions that will actually create the least amount of smoke compared to a true wildfire, and also a much safer smoke, not safe smoke, but a smoke that is safer than a true wildfire. The contaminants and the chemicals that are in a true wildfire are much different than a prescribed fire. That being said, we understand that we have communities that are at risk to any form of smoke, prescribed or otherwise. And that's why the public information campaigns leading prior to any prescribed fire will occur. And we have to have what's called a smoke management plan. So we are anticipating which direction the volume is and the volume of smoke. And so we'll be able to inform the communities and perhaps allow people to, if they're sensitive to smoke, to either be indoors that day or out of the area.
Let me ask about a question that's been, it's a little off topic, but not really. It's been in the news quite a bit over the last several years. And I think it's squarely within the wheelhouse that you gentlemen inhabit. But if you want to take a pass on this, I totally understand. Housing. So all we hear about is the need for housing. We have to build more housing. We have to build it here, there, everywhere. It has to be more dense. And then the rejoinder from those who have a different point of view is don't build more houses in wildfire risk areas. I don't know how else to present it. That's fairly inarticulate, but if you want to jump in, I'd be curious to hear if there's an official position or a personal position.
We don't have a position, Mark, as far as an authority. That is the purview of the city managers, city and county. One item in the presentation is that municipalities have passed certain ordinances regarding what can be built where, what type of construction, what type of materials. And I would say, just first off, whatever housing is built this coming year is going to be substantially more fire resistant, fire safe than what was built 20, 30, or 40 years ago. Building in the WUI is problematic, as we said. Mark talked about evacuation routes, narrow roads, the risks and consequences associated with that. I would just say that housing should fully consider the risk as we think about floods and floods and earthquakes and fires. The potential for fire should be taken into consideration, and that should drive the construction. It should drive the landscaping. It should drive the ingress and egress decisions. And it's a tough problem, Scott, but yeah, homes are Mark noted that the county assessed each parcel its risk of fire in the CWPP, the most recent CWPP. What went into that consideration was the age of the house, the type of construction, the materials that were used to construct that, say, old wood exterior, wood shaped roof, versus what we currently do now, which is hardened exteriors and fire resistant roofs with gutters that are protected, and double, triple pane windows, vegetation that's properly positioned so as to not cause threat. Full consideration of the consequences is the answer, regardless of where you build. And
fortunately for me, I'm not the person that has to make the policy decisions on these. I help inform sometimes what people might do for policy decisions. But I mean, This is there's unfortunately there's not a magic button for this one. There's no silver bullet, and because we do need more accessible housing, but we also have a significant wildland urban interface problem. And I know so many people, myself included, that are working towards a solution. I've been involved in a working group with the Association of Area Governments, working to that end. And there are ways that we can do this, but it's going to take a lot of time and thought. And especially for Marin, it's going to be difficult because we have such a built environment already. We don't have a lot of room to expand. And the built environment that we're in was designed shortly after 1906, right? It was the exodus following the earthquake of people moving into Marin, and the vehicles and the means of transportation that were available in the early 1900s. That's what those roads are designed to do. So that evacuation problem that Bruce is talking about is just exemplified when we have the ADUs that are being attached to homes to increase housing. Well, that adds one or two more cars per property. And so that just exacerbates the evacuation problem.
Okay, food for thought. And thank you for your thoughts on that. Let me move on to the next question. One of our listeners asks, can you speak to the balance between the value of standing plant material and removed plant material when it comes to carbon sequestration? Curious about your good ideas about what to do with the removed material. Is chipping in place ever an asset, or does it always look like tinder to you?
This is more in Bruce's wheelhouse, so fire away, Bruce.
Yeah, great. This is a wonderful question. Standing plant material. So what's critical about standing plant material, any plant that's in the ground that is in a landscape that is configured properly, where you've dealt with some of your ground fuels and your ladder fuels, and you space things out, like Mark showed the shaded fuel break, for example. That altered landscape is a healthy landscape that will resist fire, which will resist consumption of the material and everything going up in smoke, if you will. And it's resistant, and that healthy landscape is going to be there for decades to come, and it will continue to sequester carbon. Breathe in the CO2, build out the green. Good. So a Firewise landscape, a properly appropriately constructed landscape is the best game. As far as the stuff that you remove, there is material that does have to be removed. Is chipping a good idea? Chipping is always a good idea. If you can chip and chip it out on your landscape, it serves as mulch. It helps increase the productivity of the soil, just a few inches maximum. Is it tinder? Again, 2 to 3 inches is really not of great consequence. It's not going to carry a big fire. It's a fire that you could put out with a fire hose. What to do with the removed material? We are actually engaged in an assessment with a group of environmentalists and scientists here to take a look at all the material that we must remove to make that landscape be healthy and fire resistant. What we currently do with it, we know what we do with it. We have chippers, as Mark said, and they're taking that to either Marin Sanitary Service, Redwood landfill. Some of the larger logs are actually being sorted out and taken out to West Marin compost, and they are being resawn and being converted into slabs that can be used for for tables and what have you. Most of the material that is going out, some of our material is going out to the chips go to, of all places, they go to Marin Sanitary Service, and they ship them to Stockton to produce electricity. So think about the carbon footprint of a chip van and a half every day going out to Stockton. We could, and we're investigating the opportunity to site electrical production units here in Marin that will take, rather than shipping it out to Stockton, we would keep it here, do it locally, produce local electricity, and help to fuel electrical needs here. There's also, we're looking at biochar, a whole range of things. So we're in the process of asking that question: how much material, where is it going, where could it go with different environmental consequences? And we're looking to have that dialogue with organizations, including Zero Waste Marin, Drawdown Marin, and the franchised facilities here that are dealing with our waste. So more to come. We can give you a report on that in about, I'd say, about 6 months.
Okay. Mark, anything to add?
No, he got everything.
Very good. Let's move on. We have a question from Michael Kemerick, one of our local Firewise leaders here in Marin. Will the Zonehaven site show what zones are under evacuation orders? I assume the Marin County map would do that. And I've looked at it, and I believe it shows not only evacuation orders, but gradations of warning, evacuation, clear. But go ahead.
Yeah, you're 100% right, Scott. It'll show both maps. In fact, the map that's on the emergency.marincounty.org site is actually an embedded map from the Zonehaven site. When a change happens on the Zonehaven site, it will automatically happen at the marincounty.org site. The reason why we went with the emergency.marincounty.org site is because there's going to be other information that's pertinent to our residents in that site during an emergency. So we are trying to create a one-stop shop as much as possible for information gathering for our residents. But you're right about the gradations. There's going to be evacuation warning, evacuation order, areas that are in shelter in place, areas that are going to be allowed to be repopulated. And from my experience being a person that has issued evacuation orders and someone who has been evacuated, I know the number one question from every person that ever gets evacuated is, when can I go back home? And Zonehaven does a really good job of helping inform the public when that can occur.
Very good. And that's a brand new program, right? Statewide?
Statewide, they were created around 2018, 2019, and just about every Bay Area county is now using it and growing throughout the state.
Okay, let me turn to something that was discussed earlier in terms of the authority's inspection program, which I've seen rolled out in my neighborhood, and I live on the border of 2 different jurisdictions. So we have, for example, in my area, San Rafael handling the inspections in one section of our Firewise zone, and we have Ross Valley Fire doing the other inspections, because the other half of our group is in San Anselmo, which is under Ross Valley. And I get this question a lot, so I'd be curious as to your perspectives on it. And that has to do with the enforceability of these inspection reports. So when an inspector prepares a home inspection report, and every inspection culminates in the preparation of a document where boxes are checked and information is written down, how should that report be viewed by the homeowner? Is it something where they should view that as a set of recommendations from the fire authorities, or is it something stronger?
You are asking the statewide question that every agency is trying to tackle. You ask great questions, Scott. So our reports are actually a little bit, have 2 desires or 2 goals in them. There are some goals that are legal requirements. And so we are trying to make it obvious to the resident which ones are the legal requirements, based on whether it's if they're out in what's called state responsibility area and public resource code section 4291 applies, or if a local wildland urban interface ordinance applies. We're trying to let them know which ones are actually required by code or statute. And then we're trying to also let them know which ones are considered recommendations. That being said, statewide, there is very little enforceability of these codes and statutes. And I've literally had numerous phone calls with the legislative analyst's office. They're trying to create some type of solution statewide for this challenge. Our path has been, we would rather go through the educational path rather than the citation path. Areas that have used a citation path have not proven to be any more effective than the educational path. And if you look at our stats for compliance for Marin, they're remarkably low. But I feel that they are remarkably low for 2 reasons. So many more homes in Marin are being evaluated that have never been evaluated before in their existence. No one has ever gone to their house to tell them what they should and should not be doing around their home. Firewise communities, that's a little bit different. They've been doing it on their own. But when it comes to firefighters or inspectors coming to a home, tens of thousands of homes in Marin are getting that evaluation for the first time. So we should expect a pretty low compliance rate in that. And if you look at the quality of the inspections that we have going in Marin compared to other counties, I think our stats are low compared to other counties because of the lens that we are using. I think we have a much more critical lens that we're using than some of the other counties. The real indicator for us will be over the next 3 or 4 years, are we seeing that compliance increase through our educational efforts?
Right.
Anything else, Bruce, on that?
No, I think Mark covered it very well. You know, the philosophy that we've taken is a state-of-the-art evaluation, information, so that you have an informed homeowner and they understand the condition of their residence, and they understand then the potential consequences and the things that they can do. And much of what can be done is cost very little and is exceedingly effective. Things like putting screens over fence and what have you. The compliance question, I struggle with it. I know working here in Marin, in Nevada, and being on the Nevada Fire Protection District Board, you know, we have in place we have the regulations in place, and we have the ability to go knock on doors and cite and take action. We have found that first, second, third visits with homeowners, ultimately, you know, eight out of 10 ultimately comply. And if we have to provide them with support and assistance, we do that. And it's that 1 or 2 that you really need to work with. We do have the ability today to our fire chief can go cite, our fire prevention officer can go cite and say, thou shalt do that work, and if you don't do it, we'll do it. And of course, then we can, but you know, we have that ability, but we're taking a hearts and minds approach. And as Mark said, we are also 17 member agencies. Each one has a different heart and a mind and different soul, and the way that everyone wants to deal with it. MWPA is just a convening entity, and we have no standing. It does come down to the 17 members to make those decisions, to talk to their citizenry, to talk to the town council, have that discussion, have that dialogue with their citizens, and say, what do you want to do? And some, I think, are going to jump forward more aggressively. Some will be the last, and maybe never too. But as Mark's saying, we're knocking on doors, we're providing information, education. We're going to go knock again to see how you're doing, and we go back a third time to see how you're doing. And I think we're going to see good compliance over time. But how to deal with that, you know, that last 2 out of 10 is going to be the question that's going to go before Ross and San Rafael and Novato and Stinson Beach and Bolinas. And, you know, they're going to have those discussions locally. And as Mark said, with the state, something may launch at the state, which we can't really control. But, you know, we're just trying to encourage change, informed, educated action.
Hopefully, instead of being 2 out of 10, it'll be 1 out of 50, but we'll see.
Sure.
Let me ask you about our weather. I'm looking outside, I'm seeing the rain. How should people think about fire season in the context of today's weather versus a longer term pattern? And I ask that because, you know, every once in a while you'll hear someone say, well, it just rained, so fire season's over, I don't have to worry about my house anymore.
When I first started in the fire service, the litmus test was 2 inches of rain. We got 2 inches of rain. We called fire season. We were done. We literally took the wildland hose off the fire engines and put them on the racks in the back of the engine barn. 2 inches is no longer enough. And you let's take the drought scenario out of the equation right now. If we get a good 2-3 inches of rain right now, and it is not followed up by persistent rain after that, we're back at it. I've literally had to take that hose out of the back of the engine barn, put it back on the engines 2 months later, and start going to fires again. Now let's bring the drought into consideration. Historically, after every significant drought, when we've had a drought busting rain season, that next fire season is one of the most devastating we've had in quite some period. Now we don't only just have this one significant drought. We have 2 significant droughts that were separated by 1 average rain year. And so the fuels, the heavy fuels that are destroying homes that are on the ground will take much longer than 1 rain year to recover. And what happens is after we have this significant rain, we start getting the buildup of the fine fuels. And it's the fine fuels that we have to move into the medium and the heavy fuels in order for them to ignite. So that first year after a drought, we have an abundance of fine fuels, but the medium fuels and the heavy fuels still have not recovered from those years of drought. So I hate being the fearmonger, but it's going to take a significant time period for us to recover from the drought. And that still doesn't even address the abundance of fuel that we've created from our fire management practices.
Yeah, and if I may, Scott, great question. And this used to be the time that we'd fill our thermoses with coffee and go out and light piles on fire in the forest. And it was the most fun thing to do, was to light little piles on, or big piles on fire. A lot of fun. But I guess the question is it's fair, but it completely ignores the entire ecological consequence of the situation that we're currently in. That the 140 years of deferred maintenance, that increasing size and intensity of fire in the event of a fire, inevitably, again, it's not if but when. So let's say it's not this fall, or let's say it's not this spring, but what if it's next August, or let's say it's next October? We have so much work to do, so much deferred maintenance to do, to harden our homes, to create defensible space around our homes, because inevitably it's going to happen. And I think that the short-term thinking is dangerous. And that's why I asked to take the first part of this presentation, was to talk about the ecological history, loss of fire, fire exclusion, densification, fire size and intensity, and the inevitable. Can you take a weekend off? Yes, but next weekend, go do that defensible space work that the inspector had suggested you do. It's cooler, it's nicer outside. You're not going to be sweating a bunch. And by the way, MWPA will bring a chipper to your door and haul it away for you. I'm sorry, I just had to go there. Thank you.
No, it makes sense. And if you're not aware, the chipper days are usually organized by these Firewise sites. We did them in my site as well. I don't know, if you do not live in a Firewise site, how you access the chipper day free service. So there may be some comment you want to make on that. I'm not aware of it.
So we've transitioned. The Firewise communities are still organizing chipper days, but we have a chipper day program that goes over the entire MWPA jurisdiction regardless. And so if you go to our MWPA website, you can click on the tab Resident Info, and it'll give you a link to chipper days.
Great. Time for just a couple more questions here, and then we'll let you go. Lucy Autry Wilson asks, this is kind of granular, so I'm not sure you'll know, but where can one get information on what the town of San Anselmo is doing to manage town-owned properties, Oak Park and Fowd Park? I've tried to get information from the town management and have not had success.
I'd reach out to the Ross Valley Fire Department Prevention Bureau, would be my suggestion.
Very good. And then lastly, this is kind of a topic you've covered, but I think, to kind of wrap this up, it might help to close with this. We've talked about a variety of programs, some of which are done on the official level, some of which are community level based programs such as Firewise. But for those listening today, is there a big takeaway or set of takeaways that you would give them as far as what they can do when they get off this Zoom over the next week, month, year to help prevent fire from overtaking their home and be prepared in the event it does?
Bruce, you want me to take it first?
Yeah, you go.
First thing is that I have about 3 things to add, but I'll keep it short. First thing is everyone wants to look out. They stand at their house, they look away from their house. and point, well, that's what people need to do away from their house. I want them to go to the edge of their property and look at their house and look at what they can do at their house, to the physical house itself, to the and then to the defensible space. Then how are they going to interact as a community? And that's why I love the Firewise community so much. And I think one thing we haven't talked about with one of the advantages of being a community is that I think evacuation is a community effort. There are 250,000 people in Marin. There are 230 public safety officials on duty any given day. So if you do the math, and we have to evacuate 10, 20,000 people, how many public safety people are there to be able to affect those evacuations? And so I really think evacuations are a community effort. Do you have an elderly neighbor, someone with access and functional needs that you perhaps can help get that person evacuated? One of the times my house was evacuated, my neighbors knew I wasn't home. They knew my wife and I weren't home. And I have video of our neighbors coming to my house, pounding on the door and informing my adult children that they need to evacuate. And so to me, that's part of that community effort. And then the last thing, if you haven't already, sign up for alertmarin.org, sign up, and then also learn what evacuation zone you're in.
Great answer, Mark. House out, yes. I would say that you're asking that question, what you can do. Mark mentioned that the funds that taxpayers are providing to fund this wildfire prevention work have hired 54 wildfire mitigation specialists who are knocking on doors and explicitly hired to tell you to look at your home, look at your house, look at your windows, look at your gutters, look at your roof, look at your siding, look at your vegetation. And in essence, they leave a written prescription with pictures, arrows, circles, as to what it is that needs to be done with some level of prioritization. If you've not received a home assessment, pick up the phone, call your fire chief and say, hey, I want to know what I can do. And I'll guarantee you that within a working week, someone's going to come and knock on your door and your neighbor's door and do that assessment and tell you explicitly what you need to do, where to start, well within your means, and what resources are available to help you get that work done. So pick up the phone, call the fire chief, and take advantage of the assistance that you've enabled here by supporting Measure C. I think it's incredible. It's an incredible resource.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank our speakers, Mark and Bruce, for bringing their insights on what is obviously a very important topic to all of us. I want to thank all of you, our audience, for tuning in for this important presentation and for your questions. I mentioned on the chat that today's program has been recorded. It will be available for viewing and sharing and streaming, or whatever you call it, on our website, which gives you a link to the YouTube video. Wait a few hours or maybe until tonight or tomorrow before you look for that. It takes us a little while to get that up and running, but go to marincoalition.org, look under the archives, and the very first program will be this one. And we do hope that you share that and send the link to others that weren't able to join us today. We're also going to put on that website, in the same vicinity of the page, the PowerPoint presentation that you've been able to view today, so that if you missed a slide or you want to see that slide again and send it on to someone, that'll be available to you as well. I want to thank our webmaster and fellow board member, Alan Shavitz, for helping to orchestrate another terrific program for us here. I also want to thank fellow board member Pat Randolph for organizing this presentation. So thank you for joining us. We hope we'll see you next month when we'll have a presentation on November 3rd. Again, the publishers of the IJ and the San Francisco Chronicle, Bill Nagel and Ron DiVincenzi. Looking forward to that. Thank you for tuning in. Thank our speakers, and we hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.